Hello and welcome. Today we're going to explain used cars and demonstrator cars and how that market works and the differences between used and demonstrators.
Let's get into it.
Mark, can you explain what is the difference between a demonstrator and a used car and how the market works exactly with cars coming into dealers?
That's a very good question, John. It's funny, demonstrators were a rarity during COVID. So I think it's important to take a longer term view. The longer term view you take, the more sense what you're seeing right now makes. So if you look at what a normal market, and then there was COVID, and then there was the post-COVID period, and now we're back to what will resemble a normal market from a supply, demand, and stock of used vehicles, etc. So when we look at new cars, pretty straightforward. Off the factory, out of the factory, off the boat, into a dealership, 0 kilometers or anything up to 50 kilometers because it's been transported and tested. But that's a new car. That's usually sticker price, or in the case now, there's a bit of discounting going on, but the recommended retail price plus on-road costs, there's your new car. Drive it off the road, it's now a used car. You own it. You'll keep it for between 5 to 7 years. Unless it's a lease, it might be a bit shorter than that, but that's the average retail buyer owns the car for that long. Lease company might have it for 3 to 4 to 5. But anyway, they're the sort of terms that you have those cars. So that's what we call the mum and dad car. So when we look at the other cars that come back a bit sooner, so that's half of the cars are those cars. They're the ones that are pretty much owned by somebody for, as we know through the data from the New Car Buyer Survey, is the majority of people own them up to 8 years. So 50% of each car, all cars purchased each year, will be owned for 8 years on average.
With 30 years' experience in auto logistics and state-of-the-art locations in 5 major Australian cities, Pre-Car Fleet Services are a premier all-in-one solutions provider for commercial vehicle fleet operators, leasing companies and original equipment manufacturers. Please visit precar.com.au and click on the link to Fleet Services.
So then we look at the other 50%. These are the ones that come back as used cars through different channels. Now, the first used car, and you mentioned the name of it before, as a demonstrator. There's actually 2 types of demonstrators in a dealership. There's the new car demonstrator, which is the one that is registered for new car prospects to drive the vehicle around the block after a bit of extended drive because it's got registered plates on it. They can drive it on the road, drive it on the highway, feel what the car's like, and then come back, sign up for a new car. Now, those demonstrators traditionally would be given some sort of financial incentive from the car manufacturer to the dealer in order to register the costs associated with registering a demonstrator. And there's usually limitations to how long that car can be retained as a demonstrator. There's a minimum time period, and then there's a maximum time period, because a 4-year-old car can't be a demonstrator because that's not a demonstrator anymore. It's not demonstrating a new car. That's a used car. So that's not a demonstrator. But there are demonstrators and there are demonstrators. So a genuine demonstrator is one that's, as I mentioned, driven. Car sales takes you out for a drive. New car manager may drive it home at night. Sales consultant may drive it home at night. But they're usually retained up to around about 5,000 kilometres. After that, they're then on-sold. So they're an on-sold demonstrator. And they actually present exceptional value because usually being a demonstrator on show all the time, they're kept very clean. They're kept in good condition, and they're not really driven hard by any stretch by the people that are evaluating, because usually the sales consultant goes with the customer in the car. So they're well maintained. Now, some demonstrators, when we get to a situation where there's a push for car companies and dealers to achieve targets, there'll be an incentive for dealers to put more demonstrators on than what they potentially need. So a dealer may have maybe 5 or 6 demonstrators registered at any given time for their new car showroom, depending on the different products they're selling. And there might be an incentive to demo up a few more, put a few more, register a few more as a demonstrator, just to get your end of month target. Because remember, we talked before about what the sales numbers that we talk in VFACTS are. They're not sales, they're registrations or deliveries. Now, a vehicle registered as a demonstrator, not sold to anybody, still appears in the VFACTS sales number for that month. It's not sold to anybody. It is sitting there as a registered car at the dealership. So let's be clear. And we look at it from a percentage. Pre-COVID, that percentage is running about 15% of all registrations would have been a demonstrator, and then they eventually get on-sold. So They do get on sold. They don't all just sit there idle for months and months, but in some cases they do. So, some cars sit in dealerships as demonstrators for 12 months. And after 12 months, the expectation is that you move them on as used cars because they're not demonstrators anymore. So 5,000 Ks, realistically, after 6 months, you'd want to move that demonstrator on. So if you're a retail buyer that would have bought a new car, a really good value for money proposition is actually buying that demonstrator from that dealer. And it's always worth asking the question, well, what about this demonstrator? Is there a deal that you can do? Because there's usually thousands of dollars that you can save in getting that demonstrator versus a new car. And yet in the main, it's a new car, right? So we've got that as an option. Then you've got another vehicle in the dealership called a service loan car. Now, those vehicles are for service customers to drive whilst they are having their vehicle serviced for the day, or it may even be a vehicle off-road situation where they've had a warranty situation and that car's been driven for a week or two, maybe, depending on your parts arrivals for that car. So here they have is a situation where they're slightly higher kilometres, and once again, usually in the main, they're gone after 12 months. So a service loan car, ex-service loan car, is another good option to buy, given it's still been maintained in the dealership. But the individual customers are driving them without supervision of the dealer staff. But they're still very good value for money. They're well maintained. The service teams look after them very well. And we know the service guys are probably the best guys at the dealerships. They really do know how to look after cars. So that's a service loan car. So they're the ones that are controlled directly by the dealership. Another good car to get, if ever you see them for sale in a dealership, is an ex-company car, one the car company themselves has been operating. And John, executives such as yourself, and I know I've had a couple through my time as well, these are cars that we would drive as OEM employees, really nice cars, and the dealers in that franchise network get the opportunity, and they're the only ones that can actually buy those cars as ex-company cars. And they are really good value because they're driven by the OEM employees who take a lot of pride in their cars. They're one owners, they're maintained, and they present excellent value. They're usually at a lower price than what the demo is or the service loan car because they've got a few more Ks on them. In the main, nothing more than, say, 10, 15,000 Ks would be the expectation before they get turned over. Because an executive for a car company would turn their car over 3 or 4 times a year. So just so they could change colour, change model, all this sort of stuff. So they're good value for money cars. So if you're looking at for something like that, you can pick up a really good deal now that stock's freeing up and the OEMs are putting more cars through. Then you move into the next source of used cars, which is coming out of the rental market. Now, renter cars are one of the shortest cycle vehicles that happen in the genuine used car space. So often a rent-a-car company will buy the cars, they'll run them traditionally for 12 to 18 months to 2 years, and then turn them over with something between 30 and 50,000 kilometres. COVID extended that out so that the mileage is a lot higher and they're a little bit rougher. So these cars get different drivers. They're washed every day. They can be really good value for money, and they're at a lower price again to the other cars that we mentioned. So you're getting a fairly new car at a lower price than you would if you were buying a new car or a demonstrator or an ex-company car. So that's the stratum but you're getting something fresh. After that, we go to a model that we talked about in one of our earlier podcasts, which is the government vehicles, because the governments turn their cars over between 2 to 3 years in the main from a lease perspective. And the beauty of these cars is that they're tool of trade cars used by people who work in various departments for various functions. Passenger cars, light commercials, and SUVs. They're the main vehicles. And the beauty of those cars is, for example, ex-police cars get turned over a lot faster because they get their kilometres quicker. So you can actually pick up a ex-police car at a very, very young age, but usually with a little bit more kilometres. But if you want to have a fairly new model used car that's a very good price that's been maintained, the police cars won't. Some police cars get driven hard, others don't. So it's a matter of a bit of buyer beware. Have a look at the car, have a look at the conditions, floor mats, the pedals, etc., to see whether it's had a hard time in the time that it's had it. Look for holes in consoles and all this sort of stuff, depending if it's been restored properly. But in the main, you can get some really good value vehicles that way, or other cars that are just used by general duties operators in other departments. So there's plenty to choose from a state government, federal government, and even from a local government perspective. Local governments tend to keep the cars a bit longer, but they're really good value for money cars.
And Mark, where does the dealer pick those cars up?
Oh, dealers know where to get them. They can go through auction, or there's tendering processes. The beauty with the government side of things is retail buyers can go to those same avenues to buy those cars. Rented cars normally get traded in with dealers. Sometimes they may be offered for sale to private individuals, but in the main they get sold back to dealers who then put them on their lots and sell them. If you're looking to buy cars, where would you want to buy these cars from? The dealer's going to give you the safety and security of clear title, of in the main having good quality, lower kilometre, younger vehicles through those elements that I talked about: the demos, ex-company cars, the service loan cars, and the renter cars. But when you start to get into the government sphere, and then the next level is also the not-for-profit sphere. Some of those get sold back to, most of them get sold back to dealers. Some may be sold into the private market. Others, such as B2B or novated leases and these sorts of vehicles, they're sold through the leasing companies, often through auctions or sometimes directly to dealers through tender. But there's also the scope for private individuals to maybe contact those organisations to see what they've got on offer, which many of them do have a portfolio of cars that they will put out to public tender for people to buy. And those cars will still have warranty on them. They'll be 3 or 4 years old. They'll have maybe 100,000, 120,000 kilometres on them. And that's the next stage down from a purchase perspective. But there's some really good value for money in those cars too, because these are cars that are being changed over, not because there's something wrong with a car. And that's the beauty of all these cars that we've mentioned and the sources of these cars. They're not being sold by someone as saying, oh, look, there's actually something wrong with this. I want to get rid of this because before it's going to cost me a lot of money. They're getting turned over because the financial sense for that organisation or that entity or that individual makes sense for them to turn that vehicle over. So this is where the turning over as a buyer of a used car, that's where you want to go to. We always talk about, the one owner car. Well, that one owner car is the car that's going to be for sale in 7 years' time, because that's the majority of those 50% private buyers. That's when they're keeping their cars for. And certain brands are overrepresented in the short cycling element. Other brands that just sell mainly to private buyers and don't do the short cycling rental fleet or any of that sort of stuff, those cars stay with customers longer, and they're the ones that enjoy higher residual values. But in the main, the fundamental demand for the car is, if it's a good car, it will level out some of that depreciation, and there'll still be demand for a good low kilometre ex-government car, even though brand B doesn't do any government deals. Therefore, there's no discounts. Therefore, the government doesn't buy it because financially it doesn't make sense for them to do so. As much as they would love to buy them, it just doesn't make sense to do so.
And Mark, do most of the dealers trade in those cars that are 7 to 8 years old where they've had one buyer? Are those vehicles normally retained by the dealer to on sale as a used car?
If they're in good condition, absolutely. Dealers are the best source of used car stock for a dealer is a trade-in from a customer. So proactive dealers will often reach out to customers who have got cars. They did it very well through COVID. They would approach all their existing customers and offering them huge money to get them out of their existing cars because they needed stock. But in the main, that has always been a good process for good dealers. That was normal process for them, is to always give valuations to existing customers to get them out of their car and into another car. So that's definitely something. And often, if there's a strong order bank like there has been through COVID, the first go-to is your existing customers, and good quality, good sales operatives embed themselves in the service department to just give valuations and trade-ins for trade-ins for vehicles, and then offer the new car, offer the demo, offer the service loan car. This is where all the pieces of the puzzle fit in together, and how you end up with these service loan cars, because those cars are being used to sell new cars.
And Mark, the last category, the peer-to-peer sales, how does that work, and what are the challenges with that?
Well, that's the biggest one, actually. We always talk about the 1.2 million new car sales. Well, there's more than double, close to triple that, as far as actual sales that occur in peer-to-peer. That's the Facebook marketplace. That's car sales. That's Gumtree. These are the channels where people sell the car behind me, for example. That's not a car that would normally end up in a dealer. It might end up in a specialist used car dealer for specialist old cars. But in the main, they're the cars you find on peer-to-peer sites. And that's where there's the greatest risk, because that's where you need to know whether the person you're dealing with is genuine, whether they actually own the car. Is there money outstanding on the car? What's the condition of the car? Why are they selling the car? All these things come into play. Why a dealer's selling a car? They're selling it to make money. Why a fleet's selling a car? Because the lease is up and they want to buy another vehicle. Why a rent-a-car is selling the car? Because it's time to turn it over. Why a dealer's selling a demo or a service loan car? Because it's time to turn it over. So all these elements are reasons why, and that makes the peer-to-peer bit the trickiest bit, but it can also be a bit of a adrenaline rush, because you can pick up a bargain or you can get burnt badly. So there's two things, and hopefully you have a win-win for the person selling and the person buying. And you'd like to think more of that happens than the two other extremes of getting burnt or getting a car for outrageously less than what it's worth. So they're nice wins to have. It's not nice to be burnt. But in the main, if it's a win for the seller, win for the buyer, that's a good thing. But once again, it comes down to know the car, know what sort of to expect from an expense perspective. You're still running a risk. There's no warranties on peer-to-peer, so buyer beware. That's caveat emptor.
Thanks very much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion around the different types of used cars and what value you can get in the different categories.
Thank you for listening.